Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us today in our evening session. I request all our viewers to join our session as soon as possible. Our session is currently live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter channel of Heritage Society. Uh, uh, Today with us we have our distinguished and eminent speaker today, Madam Jennefer Celeste Paxton. She is joining from University of Alabama to us. Uh, Madam Speaker has did her, graduated from Jacksonville State University in 2010 with a Bachelor of Arts degree concentrating on printmaking and minoring in art history. She went on to obtain her Master of Arts degree at the University of Alabama at Birmingham in 2017, specializing in South Asian arts and minoring in early 20th century modern art. Over the course of education, Mrs. Paxton was honored with several academic distinctions, including Outstanding Achievement in Art History from Jacksonville State University, a Student Award for Excellence from University of Alabama, and Outstanding Graduate Student Award in Art History from University of Alabama. She has also been awarded with Ireland Research Travel Scholarship, and she has widely published her research papers in several leading and international journals. She has since graduating with her master's degree. Mrs. Paxton has had the honor of working on multiple museum contracts for the United States Army. Currently, she serves on the on-site manager for the QualX Corporation, managing an archival project for the United States Army Heritage and Education Center. She and her team are tasked with digitizing approximately 24,000 linear feet of archival materials over a 5-year period. So Madam Speaker has lot of experience working in variety of fields, working in different disciplines of art history and other branches of history. So and it is really our honor that we have been joined by Madam Speaker today. She will be speaking today on the topic. She will be speaking today on the topic ritual self defense and territoriality at the rock art site of Chaturbhujnath Nala. Uh, uh, this site is located in the state of Madhya Pradesh, India, and it is one of the largest rock art galleries known in the world today. It also consists of an open air rock shelters found in a rift valley along an ephemeral tributary that pours into the Chambal River. And Madhya Pradesh is also known for many great things. The river Narmada flows here. There has been Mesolithic sites has also been discovered here. So in her today's lecture, she will contextualize her painting, the discoveries that she has found in Chaturbhujnath Nala, and by extension of similar artworks within the broader scope of the technological advancement of the Chalcolithic era and the Vedic period, during which the most ancient of Hindus texts were composed. She will argue about the artist of Chaturbhujnath Nala strategically created those images for ritual evocation, territorial demarcation, and as a means of self-defense to identify, protect, and bless the lands upon which they thrived. In addition, she will also discuss and she will speak on the different extraordinary level of complexity and self-awareness that is attached with this prehistoric artworks of Chaturbhuj Nala. So I will not take much time, and I will request Madam Speaker Jennefer Celeste Paxton to kindly begin the session. We are really sorry for little network problem as well as technical errors, because of which I'm unable to open my camera today. But we are solving the issue. It will be solved very soon. So I request all our viewers to stay live with us and enjoy the session today. It's a very important topic and very relevant topic. So thank you, Madam Speaker, for joining us. I now request Madam Speaker to kindly begin the session.
Hello, everyone, and thank you to the Heritage Society for hosting me as a guest speaker. I feel very humbled and privileged to be here today, and I appreciate you letting me share my theories with you. Today, I will be talking about the rock art site of Chaturbhujnath Nala and a painting that I believe embodies ritual, self-defense, and territoriality. Chaturbhujnath Nala, located in the state of Madhya Pradesh, is one of the longest rock art galleries in the world, stretching over 5 kilometers. In 1977, the site was first rediscovered by 3 researchers, Ramesh Kumar Pancholi, Abid Chadhari, and Siddhesh Bhatnagar. There are a number of fascinating images throughout the rock shelters at Chaturbhujnath Nala, with many portraying horse-drawn chariots and armed warriors. My research focuses on this particular chariot painting, which I will contextualize within the broader scope of the technological advancements of the Chalcolithic period, when the most ancient of Hindu texts were composed. I will demonstrate that the artists of Chaturbhujnath Nala strategically created such images for ritual evocation, territorial demarcation, and as a means of self-defense. This will reveal the extraordinary level of complexity and self-awareness found within the prehistoric artworks at Chaturbhujnath Nala. So let's get started. The site is roughly an hour's drive for the nearest city, Jhalawar, in Rajasthan, and the arrival point is on the flat-lying areas above the shelters. From this vantage point, you can look upon the surrounding forest, or you can look down the ravine towards the stream, or Nala. To gain access to the rock art paintings, you must traverse down the ravine, across the Nala at its shallowest end, and up the right bank where the majority of the rock shelter paintings are located. Some shelters are very shallow and low-lying, requiring you to sit or lie down to see the images, while others are quite large with room to stand and walk about. The rock art itself spans an extensive period of time, with the oldest images first appearing in the Upper Paleolithic period between 40,000 and 10,000 BCE. Paintings continued to emerge in almost every time period between then and the 10th century CE, and they illustrate a wide range of subjects, including human forms and activities, as well as flora, fauna, and geometric forms. Returning to our focal image, you can see that it features a chariot pulled by 4 horses and 2 charioteers. There are also 2 figures on foot, an untethered horse, a free-roaming stag, and a fiery-looking humanoid figure behind the chariot. Within the painting, we find a number of artistic conventions standard in rock art, such as simplified, stylized forms, tilted perspectives, and a combination of frontal, profile, and 3/4 views. The total composition measures an impressive 52 centimeters wide by 25.5 centimeters in height, which is significantly larger than most compositions within the shelters. For the purposes of my research, I refer to this vignette as chariot drawn by 4 horses. Based on the stylistic and chronological dating systems established by earlier researchers, chariot drawn by 4 horses has been dated to the Chalcolithic period between circa 2300 BCE and 1000 BCE. Typical of the period are triangular-shaped bodies and animals that are depicted in red slip. As we move forward in this discussion, I will analyze the importance of place combined with influence from the Chalcolithic period to establish context and motive for this image. I'll more closely analyze the iconography to demonstrate how the motifs were combined into a powerful form of visual communication that displays an emerging ritual for the purposes of self-defense and territoriality. I will reveal the parallels that exist between this painting and the oldest ancient literature in India, and how it may contain one of the earliest known representations of a Vedic god. Furthermore, I will demonstrate how the rock art painting could have been used to invoke the powers of the divine through a process known as sanctification. This will reinforce how the painting demonstrates a heightened level of complexity, self-awareness, and agency in prehistoric South Asian rock art that has yet to be fully acknowledged. The open-air rock shelters of Chaturbhujnath Nala are found along an ephemeral tributary that pours into the Chambal River. The rock formations are approximately 900 million years old, and they're composed of Vindahayan sandstone that has metamorphosized to quartzite over time. This is typical in the area of the Banpura-Gandhi-Sagar Plateau and the surrounding region. Millions of years ago, the plateau witnessed a series of tectonic movements and a boundary fault was formed extending from the plateau in Madhya Pradesh to Kota, Rajasthan. Along the fault are adjoining rift valleys or deep, narrow depressions that resulted from a spread in the Earth's crust. The Nala, or body of water at Chaturbhujnath Nala, passes through such a rift valley. While such details may seem tedious, they are important to our understanding of why such an area would have been chosen for rock art. As I'm going to demonstrate, the physical characteristics of this site find parallels with sacred elements in the first book of the Vedic Sanskrit literature known as the Vedas. The Rig Veda was written between circa 1600 and 1000 BCE. However, individual hymns are believed to have been composed and transmitted orally much earlier, hundreds and possibly even thousands of years before they were committed to writing. The knowledge of the hymns was confined to a select group of Brahmins who, on the basis of their superior knowledge, was said to be sanctioned by the gods to perform major rituals. The preservation of the hymns in their original form was considered paramount, and exacting measures were often taken to ensure the efficacy via precise transmission of the verses and syllables from one Brahmin to the next. It is from these ancient hymns that we can ascertain why a site like Chaturbhujnath Nala would have been considered a place of great importance during pre- and proto-historic periods. The Rig Veda tells the story of how Indra, the thunder wielder, slew the mighty dragon Vitra with his Vajra and freed the great rivers of life. In this slide, you can see a sculptural representation of Indra holding his thunderbolt or Vajra. Book 1, Hymn 32, verses 11 and 12 tell us, "Guarded by Ahi stood the thralls of Dasas. The water stayed like kin held by the robber. But he, when he had smitten Vitra, opened the cave wherein the floods had been imprisoned. A horse's tail was thou when he, O Indra, smote on thy bolt, thou, God, without a second. Thou hast won back the kine, hast won the Soma, thou hast let loose to flow the 7 rivers." The story of Indra splitting the cave parallels the formation of a rift valley like the one where Chaturbhujnath Nala is located, with a rock formation that split in two to form a series of open rock shelters with a body of water flowing freely between them. That Chaturbhujnath Nala is secluded in a heavily forested area further signifies that this may have been a sacred site. Book 1, Hymn 55, verses 4 through 6 say, "He only in the wood is praised by worshippers when he shows forth to men his own fair Indra power. He makes the light of heaven shine forth, secure he bids, exceeding wise, the flows flow for his worshipper." The myth establishes a relationship between the sacred, the secluded area, and the flowing waters, which are bestowed as blessings to Indra's ardent followers. Chaturbhujnath Nala embodies these blessings with its abundance in natural resources. The thick forests and natural source of clean water create a good habitation for the abundant flora and fauna, while the rock shelters provide a natural form of protection from the rains, sun, and wildlife. Due to their material composition, rock shelters were also generally good sites for manufacturing tools beginning in the Paleolithic period. Evidence of such tool production has been recovered at Chaturbhujnath Nala. In late 2006, Dr. Giriraj Kumar led a team of archaeologists to conduct the first excavations at Chaturbhujnath Nala. The team found microlithic factory sites located on both banks of the Nala and also on its feeder ends, with most situated quite close to the stream. However, the site was lacking in what could be considered cultural material. This is significant considering that there are over 2,500 images that have been found throughout the rock shelters. Of those, over 80% were produced in the Neo-Chalcolithic period or later, between circa 4000 BCE and 500 CE. This confirms that people utilized this site from as early as the Paleolithic period, but they chose not to occupy it as a place of residence. Nearby, a microlithic factory site was also rediscovered at the confluence of the tributary with the Dawad Nala. While the Dawad Nala is also full of rock shelters, it is not nearly as rich in rock art. Thus, while both of these sites were considered adequate for the production of microliths, one was preferred over the other for artistic production. Combined with the lack of cultural material, this lends evidence to the idea that Chaturbhujnath Nala was held in high regard and most likely functioned as a sacred space. The dating of chariot drawn by 4 horses, circa 2300 to 1000 BCE, is a transitional period in India's Bronze Age between the Neolithic and historic periods. Man had acquired the advanced technological skills to produce copper tools and weapons, but continued to manufacture them in stone due to the restricted availability of copper ore. It is also an era in which man saw the development of warfare, the establishment of the earliest known professional armies, advanced forms of weaponry, and what has rightfully been deemed as the first arms race of the ancient world. During this time, Chalcolithic cultures prospered during the 2nd millennium BCE across a large region of the central Indian plateau. At least 3 Chalcolithic cultures span the same region and time frame as our focal image. They are the Kayatha culture, the Ahar or Banas culture, and the Malwal culture. These range in date from circa 2000 to 1200 BCE, and you can see that they overlap one another. Common characteristics of these cultures include well-made pottery, specialized blade and flake manufacturing, and copper smelting, albeit on a restricted scale at most of these sites. They subsisted via agriculture along with raising stock, hunting, and fishing. Because there was no large expanses of land available right along the banks of the rivers and tributaries, it was a necessity for them to develop their agricultural capabilities in the black soil regions where the earth is rich in organic matter. Archaeologists R.K. Sharma and S.K. Tiwari suggest that these cultures were a mixture of indigenous and foreign peoples with the technological knowledge to produce axes, bangles, and other copper objects. Yet the lack of experimental smelting sites indicates that this technology was originally developed somewhere else and then migrated into the area between 2000 and 1800 BCE. In addition, at one of the Kayatha cultural sites that is less than 35 miles from Chaturbhujnath Nala, called Manoti, researchers found that remnants of a 4-foot mud rampart existed, dating between 2000 and 1400 BCE. According to Vishnu S. Wakankar, the rampart functioned as a defense wall to establish a territorial fortification and protect the inhabitants from outside invaders. Furthermore, philologist Max Mueller has argued that the Aryans had also made their way into the Indian subcontinent by the Chalcolithic period, bringing with them their Indo-Aryan language and Vedic culture. Although Mueller's theories are heavily contested today, the historical context of chariot drawn by 4 horses is very clear. It was an era of increasing foreign contact and intercultural relations that led to new social concerns over protection and territorial rights. By the Chalcolithic period, contact between foreign indigenous cultures in and around Chaturbhujnath Nala likely led to an intercultural exchange of social ideas, an absorption of religious tenets, and the appropriation of cultural motifs for communicative purposes. It is of no small consequence that chariot drawn by 4 horses was created during a time when hunter-gatherers were transitioning to a more settled agricultural-based lifestyle and that the earliest state-level societies were being formed. Land was worked in common by a clan or community, and arguments over the rights of usage and the division of fields often led to the breakdown of clan identity, with the land being subdivided among smaller groups and families. These concerns continued to evolve as technological advancements led to craft specializations in copper, bronze, and iron, as the delineation of boundary lines would determine who was in control of this new technology. During this time, the clans were organized as patriarchal groups with a Raja placed at the head of the clan. The word Raja, meaning king today, is better understood in its earliest references to mean chief. Usually, the clansman most capable of protecting the clan and expanding its wealth was selected as the Raja. As a Raja acquired more land and greater wealth, it allowed him to claim more authority and act as a patron or sponsor of ritual sacrifice. Thus, chiefships and the role of the Raja became associated with notions of territory. The realm ruled by the Raja became known as the Janapada, or place where the tribe places its foot. As the position of Raja rose to prominence, it gave birth to ceremonies to establish his status as chief as well as secure his dominion. Once the chief was legitimized, he was able to perform the Rajasuya, which consecrated him with divine powers. These powers were gifted by the gods but vested through the powers of the priests or the Brahmins, who served as intermediaries between the gods and men. Such rituals involved rites of purification, symbolic rebirth, and an offering from the Raja. The Ashvamedha, or horse sacrifice, is perhaps the best known of these rituals. To establish his authority and divine powers, the Raja would release a horse to wander at will. The horse was accompanied by a bodyguard, and the Raja claimed the territory over which it wandered. On return of the horse, a ritual involving the rite of fertility was performed by a Brahmin. It was a ritual meant to reinforce the authority and elevated status of the Raja, but one that also emphasized the elevated status of the Brahmin and the divine. I believe chariot drawn by 4 horses illustrates the Ashvamedha mid-progress, when the horse is wandering freely as a Brahmin and an attendant note the territory to be claimed as part of the Raja's kingdom. The question becomes, why would this ritual appear in the rock art at Chaturbhujnath Nala? With very few exceptions, ancient India looked at the acquisition of land as a legitimate endeavor. This is later typified in the epic tales of the Mahabharata, as well as the laws of Manu, which date to circa 5th century BCE. They describe waging war for territorial expansion as good in its own right and part of a ruler's religious and civic duty. There is a strong connection between the first organized societies in Chalcolithic India and early notions of boundary and territorial expansion, as even the earliest hunter-gatherers incorporated systems of spatial use, demarcation, and defense. Boundaries were first instituted to define hunting grounds and establish areas for farming. The Chalcolithic era saw increased mobility that further elevated the concern for boundary definitions. Rajas and Brahmins were traveling between royal courts, devotees were going on pilgrimages, and merchants were establishing specialized trade routes. As mentioned earlier, boundaries also became increasingly important with the introduction of new technologies. Before these new tools and weapons could be manufactured, the raw material had to be procured, and sources were limited. The Aravalli Hills were rich in copper and thus were important to copper production in the western areas of central India. Chalcolithic sites such as Ahar and Ganeshwar took advantage of their proximity to these natural resources, providing them with the impetus for more advanced urban centers. Sites prized because of their association with the sacred also played a crucial role in fostering the desire to clearly demarcate one's dominion. This was especially true for areas with groves, rock shelters, and bodies of water. Territoriality, or the need to define and maintain one's area of dominance, led to the formation of dominance hierarchy or localized social groupings. In order to defend against outsiders, these groups developed a form of defense known as demarcation. They often utilize natural physical boundaries to define their territories, However, demarcation was also established through visual signs, particularly in areas of conflict. I suggest that Chariot Drawn by Four Horses is an example of the use of rock art for territoriality and ritual demarcation to ward off conspecifics through a sanctioned image of divine ritual that established the area as part of the artist or patron's dominion. In addition, demarcation simultaneously serves as a means of expressing identity. Only recently have scholars begun to look at Stone Age people as having the mental faculties required to purposely vary depictions of human activities in consideration of social ideals. Australian archaeologists Joe MacDonald and Peter Veth maintain that rock art may have been produced more during high periods of cultural exchange and less during periods of social isolation, when these signaling behaviors would not have been needed. They note that the use of rock art as demarcation in ephemeral lands is used even more systematically, and that rock art production for asserting territory, ritual ascendancy, and collective identity was well underway by 4000 BCE. As Chaturbhujnath is an ephemeral tributary rich in natural resources, such theories may explain why it became so rich in rock art in an age of increasing population and foreign contact. This suggests our focal image was created as a complex work of cognitive reasoning in which territory, ritual ascendancy, and identity were being negotiated. This is an image of Chaturbhujnath that represents a scene of warfare. Oh, whoops. I need to go back. Sorry, guys. Oh, I lost my spot. I'm so sorry. Okay, it is also my belief that Chariot Drawn by Four Horses is an image that employs aspects of artification and perfection via appropriation of outsider beliefs and social norms. This came about through cultural interactions of the indigenous people of Western Central India and those of Indo-European descent. The appropriation of preconceived idioms into the painting allowed the artist to construct the collective identity of a devout people legitimized in their territorial conquest and protected by the Hindu god Indra as a means of defense and self-preservation. Each motif has been carefully considered and placed within the composition in order to achieve that message. However, when we examine the composition, several questions come to mind. Could this be a hunting scene or an army marching off to war? How do we know it depicts a ritual? If we look at comparable rock paintings from this site and from the same period, distinguishing characteristics provide us with those answers. This is an image at Chaturbhujnath that represents a scene of warfare. It depicts four figures in the body of the vehicle, wielding their axes up in the air, posed for battle. There is also a foot soldier with weapon raised in a similar attack and defense posture. This imbues the painting with a sense of action and drama that tells us there is a confrontation occurring between oppositional forces. Hunting scenes are also common at Chaturbhujnath. In this example, there is a human figure posed to kill his prey. His arrow is drawn back in the bow in anticipation of it projecting forward and impaling the creature. Likewise, there are several Chalcolithic paintings that depict processions and other celebratory festivities. They are primarily characterized by groups of figures in a formation or sequence, often with the incorporation of acrobats, boxers, load carriers, and musicians. These images usually have a rhythmic or theatrical feel. Sometimes the artist also employed an S-curve in the bodies to suggest a sense of swaying, or they place circles in front of the mouth to convey chanting. Thus, warfare, hunting, and processional images each have their own defining characteristics. The artists of Chaturbhujnath knew how to distinguish between each type through dramatic gesture, pose, temperament, and cadence. In Chariot Drawn by Four Horses, the characteristics of warfare, hunting, and processional scenes are lacking. Instead, with the exception of the dynamic rendering of the fiery figure, the rest of the composition exudes a mood of calm and restraint. This further demonstrates that chariot drawn by 4 horses may be depicting a ritual, as sacral images are often instilled with a sense of control and tranquility. The placement of the image on the rock shelter also suggests it is an image of particular importance and one that is likely sacred. Most of the other paintings at Chaturbhujnath Nala are small, and they're tucked deep within the crevices of the rock shelters. Many are very difficult to view. In contrast, chariot drawn by 4 horses is prominently placed at the beginning of the largest rock shelter on site and just above eye level. This signifies that the view was intentionally located to command attention as viewers entered and exited the most usable space within the shelters. Its conspicuous placement, combined with the lack of battle action, hunting elements, and celebratory features, substantiate that this was a significant ritual image strategically placed for optimal impact. In India, efficaciousness has been a crucial underpinning in the creation of ritual images since ancient times, and it is best achieved through an image sanctioned within tradition. The image must be awakened and purified by the deity to which it is associated. Thus, the artwork must be complete in accordance with the iconographic descriptions of the sacred hymns. Otherwise, the depicted conquest would be considered immoral and not upheld by the gods. It is this type of devotion that led to the iconographic details within chariot drawn by 4 horses. In order for the painting to function as a form of territorial demarcation and garner the protection of Indra, it had to be vested with truth and authority through a faithful rendering of each Vedic element. So let's take a closer look at those elements. It was Indra with his all-outstripping chariot wheel that overthrew the twice 10 kings of men, who were too startled and too weak to resist him. The Rigveda describes Indra's chariot, or Ratha, as a 2-wheeled vehicle. The kosa, or box of the chariot, is described in the ancient texts like model types from Western Asia, Mycenae, and Egypt, presumably made of wickerwork or leather attached to a light wooden frame and fastened to the wooden axle with straps of cowhide. The chariot car in this painting likewise has the appearance of open fretwork with a lattice-like or strap-like appearance. The Rigveda also describes the wheels of Indra's chariot as attached to the ends of the axle, secured by linchpins on the outer faces, and projecting beyond the vehicle's body on either side. The axle was fixed centrally to the chariot floor, and the wheels consist of metal tires, a belly, spokes, and a nave. While unspecified in the Rigveda, scholars believe that the Vedic chariot had between 4 and 8 spokes. The wheels depicted in chariot drawn by 4 horses also has spoked wheels. This is different from earlier designs with heavy solid wheels and high fronts, such as those pictured on scarletware vessels from Mesopotamia circa 2800 BCE. However, it is in keeping with the multi-spoke styling of a wheel recovered from India dating circa 322 to 185 BCE. From the bottom of Indra's chariot, a central pole projected forward, which passed through a hole in the yoke, secured by a bolt or stout pin. The yoke fell across the necks of horses on either side of the pole. The animals were tied to the pole by their necks and at the shoulder with leather straps. 2 draught animals are more common in the Rigveda. However, 3 and 4 horses yoked into service is not uncommon, with the additional draught animals yoked abreast for greater warfare capabilities. In chariot drawn by 4 horses, the chariot is illustrated as a quadriga with a total of 4 horses yoked abreast in accordance with the descriptions of the Rigveda. An intriguing aspect of chariot drawn by 4 horses is the tilted perspective of the wheels and horses at the top of the composition, which each group mirroring the ones on the bottom. Archaeologist Erwin Neumeyer claims that the artist's lack of knowledge about certain technological details forced the artist to discard traditional painting conventions. However, he acknowledges the artist made every effort to clearly represent the whole without obscuring the principal parts. I suggest the readability of the image was the dominant factor here, with strategic intent to illustrate this chariot as one codified in accordance with the tenets of the Rig Veda. Another key aspect of the Vedic chariot is the presence of the two figures in the chariot car. In the Rig Veda, Savyasta is the name for the armored warrior who stands on the left of the car with weapon in hand. To his right stands the Sarathi, the guide to drive the horses. The Rig Veda often describes Indra and Vaya as Savyasta and Sarathi, proclaiming Indra as the best of charioteers, never to be surpassed in might or good steeds. With his triumphant chariot, Indra wins treasures and can crush everything in his path. Thus, chariot drawn by 4 horses may show Indra as both the larger deific figure to sanctify the endeavor, but also as the triumphant charioteer to ensure their journey is successful. As explained earlier, the Ashvamedha, or horse sacrifice, is first told of in the Rig Veda. In Book 1, Hymn 163, verse 5, the hymn reads, "Here, courser, are the places where they groomed thee. Here are the traces of thy hooves as winter. Here have I seen the auspicious reins that guide thee, which those who guard the holy law keep safely." Here the verses are referencing the bodyguard of the horse and ministering priests as bearing witness to the territory traversed by the horse and declaring that their conquests are sacred endeavors that are legitimized by the divine. In chariot drawn by 4 horses, the bodyguard and ministering priest are at the head of the expedition to protect the horse and ensure it remains unhindered in its travels. In addition, they bear witness to the ritual while the priest invokes the god Indra to destroy their enemies with maledictions and aggression should their holy mission not be honored. Once the ritual has been sanctified, the god will uphold it. Thus, in the back of the composition stands the massive god Indra, characterized as the personification of the thunderstorm and shown in accordance with several passages of the Rig Veda that describe him as a mighty convulsion of nature. With his thunderbolt, he is ready to destroy the Amitra, the one who does not recognize the sacredness of contracts. If chariot drawn by 4 horses depicts the Ashvamedha, as I have suggested, the stag then becomes an important consideration. There is no mention of a deer in the ritual process, and it is not an attribute considered necessary to the completion of the Ashvamedha. I suggest that the stag not only substantiates the sacred aspects of the composition, but also serves to ensure success of the Ashvamedha ritual. In the Rig Veda, the deer is repeatedly referred to in association with victory. Often, devotees such as the Maruts are instructed by the gods Indra and Agni to take the deer to ensure their conquests are successful. In Book 3, Hymn 26, verse 4, the Rig Veda says, "Let them go forth, the strong, as flames of fire with might. Gathered for victory, they have yoked their spotted deer." Yoke may serve as a metaphor for harnessing the power of the deer to ensure victory and conquest. In Book 1, Hymn 39, verse 6, the Rig Veda also specifically makes mention of a red deer as leading devotees to victory, saying, "A red deer as a leader draws." Furthermore, the name Sambara, which appears quite frequently in the ancient literature, is a variant of Sambar, the name of a large species of deer highly concentrated throughout central India. By adult age, the stags have majestic antlers with multiple points or tins that can grow up to 1 meter long. On each side, there is 1 point just above the head and 2 additional points at the top of the antlers, which correspond to physical characteristics of the deer in Chariot drawn by 4 horses. Sambar is also one of the few deer species that will directly confront even the largest of predators. In the Rig Veda, Sambara was presented as a gift because to subdue and harness Sambara was considered a great achievement. Thus, the deer became a symbol of victory in which his presence is said to ensure the success of the righteous. The deer is associated with the chase, and the chase as a pathway to Indra, as the way to truth, light, and success. In this way, the deer also symbolizes the place where no harm may befall the innocent, a place where the deer roams free from apprehension. In turn, that place becomes a holy sacrificial area and a place of the divinity. Therefore, the deer functions as a symbol of auspiciousness. The presence of the deer within the full context of Chariot drawn by 4 horses ensures that the Ashvamedha ritual is successfully performed in truth, in order that it may be consecrated as a legitimate and sacrosanct endeavor that will be upheld by the Vedic god Indra. The painting marks the landscape as part of a territory through a faithful presentation of the ritual according to doctrine, while simultaneously acting as a graphic warning about the consequence for violating the artist's boundaries through the inclusion of the deific and auspicious motifs. There is certainly a broader discussion that could be had here today regarding the legacy of this painting within a long history of chariot images in South Asia and abroad. But my goal today was to present this painting as a clear model of how the rock artists at Chaturbhujnath Nala gave careful consideration to self-preservation via societal ideals. Ideals about how a Vedic image of ritual should be represented for efficaciousness, and what a message of power should look like in the wake of expanding notions of territoriality and self-defense. It is highly demonstrative of advanced cognitive reasoning within Chalcolithic rock art paintings, in which the artists have presented themselves as faithful devotees with the sanctified right to claim Chaturbhujnath Nala as part of their territory. The consecration of the image, and by extension the landscape on which it was painted, to ensure their claim would be upheld by the Vedic god, further demonstrates how complex and sophisticated these rock art images can be. Chariot drawn by 4 horses shows a keen awareness of the collective self and a sense of agency in Indian rock art, which has generally been missing from the art historical dialogue. I hope this discussion will spur greater attention to the magnificent artworks at Chaturbhujnath Nala and other Indian rock art sites, ultimately leading to more nuanced interpretations and their great inclusion within interdisciplinary studies. Thank you for listening.